There comes a point in your life where solitude stops feeling like emptiness and starts becoming your greatest source of power. When you choose to stay single, not out of fear, not out of avoidance, but out of intention, you give yourself the space to meet the one person most people spend their entire lives running from: yourself. Being single is not a pause in your life. It is not the waiting room before love. It is the season where you rebuild your identity without noise, without pressure, without compromise. It's where you stop bending in half just to be chosen by someone who can't even meet you where you stand. When you decide to stop chasing connection just to fill a gap, you start discovering the kind of inner wholeness that no relationship can manufacture for you. You begin to understand that loneliness is not the absence of people, but the absence of connection to yourself. And once you make that connection, you stop tolerating half love, half effort, and half presence. Staying single teaches you emotional sovereignty, the ability to hold your own ground, to nurture your own stability, to become the source of your own peace. You stop outsourcing your validation. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop giving discounts on your soul. This is the season where you learn to love without losing yourself, where you learn that you don't have to shrink your dreams to make someone else comfortable. It's where you realize that the right partner doesn't complete you. They meet you in your completeness. When you stay single long enough, your life becomes so rooted, so aligned, so purposeful that you no longer choose people from your wounds. You choose from your wisdom. You choose from your wholeness. You choose from the clarity that only solitude can give. Staying single is not about avoiding love. It is about preparing for a love that is worthy of you, a love that mirrors your growth, your truth, your sacred self-respect. Until then, this chapter of your life is not empty, it is becoming. Solitude allows you to reconnect with your true identity because it removes the constant noise that drowns out your inner voice. When you step away from the expectations of others, from the pressure to be who people think you should be, you begin to hear yourself again. In quiet moments, without distraction, you finally meet the parts of you that have been waiting for acknowledgement, your desires, your fears, your truth. Solitude strips away the roles you perform for acceptance and reveals the person you are beneath the surface. Most people never experience this because they are always surrounded by noise, opinions, and emotional demands. But in solitude, you stop performing and start remembering. As you spend more time alone, you begin to notice the subtle ways you've abandoned yourself. Saying yes when you meant no, shrinking your voice to keep the peace, downplaying your dreams because someone else didn't believe in them. Solitude holds up the mirror and shows you where you lost alignment. It becomes the space where you reclaim it and rebuild your sense of self from the inside out. This reconnection isn't loud or dramatic. It's slow, steady, and deeply honest. You begin to understand what energizes you and what drains you, what you truly want and what you've only been conditioned to want. You discover the difference between your voice and the voices that have shaped you. In that quiet space, you start honoring your truth instead of hiding it. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop betraying yourself to keep relationships alive. Solitude teaches you loyalty to your own soul, something no relationship can give you. And as you reconnect with yourself, you begin to see your patterns with new clarity. You see the wounds you've been carrying, the cycles you've repeated, the behaviors you've tolerated. This awareness becomes the starting point of transformation, because once you know who you are, you stop accepting anything that contradicts it. Solitude also strengthens your intuition. When there are no external influences pulling you in different directions, your inner compass becomes sharper and more reliable. You begin to trust your instincts, your judgments, and your emotional signals. Decisions become easier because you no longer choose out of fear, loneliness, or obligation. You choose out of authenticity, and the more time you spend reconnecting with yourself, the more natural it becomes to protect your peace, prioritize your growth, and move in alignment with your deepest truth. Solitude becomes the foundation upon which your real identity stands. Being single strengthens your emotional independence because it places you in a space where you must learn to rely on your own inner resources rather than leaning on someone else for comfort, validation, or direction. When you're not in a relationship, you're not able to use another person as a buffer against your fears, insecurities, or discomfort. You are confronted with your own emotional landscape, and instead of running from it, you begin to understand how to navigate it on your own. This self-navigation builds resilience. It teaches you how to hold your own hand in moments of uncertainty, how to soothe your own stress, and how to create your own sense of stability. With each challenge you face independently, your emotional muscle grows stronger. Being single also teaches you how to separate desire from dependency. When you're not attached to someone, you learn that wanting companionship is natural, but needing someone in order to feel whole is a sign of unhealed wounds. This period of independence allows you to break that internal pattern. You start to realize that your emotional state is something you can regulate, nurture, and stabilize without outsourcing it. You learn how to sit with your feelings instead of avoiding them, how to process your experiences instead of projecting them, and how to build an internal foundation that doesn't crumble just because someone exits your life. As you grow more emotionally independent, you also become more discerning. You begin to recognize what is healthy and what is harmful, not because someone else tells you, but because you feel the difference internally. You no longer accept relationships that drain you, confuse you, or fragment your sense of self. Your standards rise naturally, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You know what you bring to the table, and you know the emotional stability you've worked hard to build. That makes you far less likely to allow chaos or inconsistency into your life. Emotional independence also gives you the freedom to experience life on your own terms. You're not constantly adjusting your emotional rhythm to match someone else's highs and lows. You build routines that nourish you, make decisions that align with you, and cultivate habits that strengthen your well-being. Over time, this creates a sense of inner wholeness that no relationship can replicate. You become someone who chooses love, not from fear of being alone, but from a place of strength and self-assurance. And that shift changes everything about the way you move through the world. You stop settling for half-hearted connections when you've spent enough time alone to understand the difference between emotional presence and emotional proximity. Solitude teaches you what your energy feels like when it is untouched, undiluted, and unharmed. Once you grow familiar with that internal clarity, you become far more aware of when someone enters your life with inconsistency, confusion, or minimal effort. You start to notice the subtle signs you once ignored, the delayed responses, the lukewarm affection, the way someone shows up only when it benefits them. These things used to feel normal because you were afraid of losing whatever connection you had, but now they feel like disturbances to the peace you fought to create. When you stop fearing loneliness, you no longer view attention as a gift or crumbs as nourishment. You recognize that a connection built on uncertainty will always drain more than it gives. Your time alone strengthens your ability to walk away from people who do not match your level of sincerity. You stop tolerating mixed signals because you understand that emotional ambiguity is not mystery, it's a lack of genuine intention. You stop making excuses for people who show you that you are an option rather than a priority. As you grow, you realize that you can't build anything real with someone whose presence feels like a question mark. You begin valuing emotional consistency in a way you didn't before. You want someone who shows up fully, not halfway. You want effort that doesn't require begging. You want connection that doesn't require shrinking. And because you've experienced the peace of being alone, you refuse to sacrifice that peace for someone who doesn't know how to honor it. This shift isn't about becoming cold or closed off. It's about recognizing your worth. You know what it feels like to invest in yourself, to heal yourself, to understand yourself. So when someone arrives offering the bare minimum, their energy simply doesn't align with the abundance you've cultivated. Half-hearted love feels foreign to you because you've tasted the fullness of self-love. And with every boundary you hold, you reinforce the truth that you are not desperate for connection. You are discerning. You are no longer searching for someone to complete you. You are looking for someone who can meet you. You're done settling because you finally understand that being alone is far less painful than staying with someone who cannot fully show up. You build a life rooted in clarity and alignment when you give yourself the space to understand what truly matters to you, rather than living according to what others expect or demand. When you are single, your choices are no longer filtered through someone else's preferences, moods, or insecurities. You get to ask yourself straightforward questions. What do I want? What feels right for me? What path feels true to my inner self? And you get to answer them honestly. This honesty becomes the foundation of a life that reflects your values instead of someone else's expectations. The more you listen to your own voice, the louder it becomes, and the easier it is to recognize what aligns with you and what doesn't. As your clarity grows, your decisions become more intentional. You choose work that speaks to you, routines that nourish you, and environments that support your growth. You stop living reactively and begin living purposefully. You let go of people who drain you, habits that numb you, and commitments that no longer fit. Instead of forcing things to work, you let things that are meant for you flow naturally toward you. This shift toward alignment brings a sense of ease you may not have known was possible. Life stops feeling like a constant negotiation, and it begins to feel like a steady unfolding of what you truly desire. Over time, clarity becomes a kind of inner compass. It guides you away from situations that disturb your peace and toward ones that expand it. You learn to trust the signals your mind and body give you. When something feels heavy, forced, or confusing, you recognize it as misalignment rather than fate. When something feels peaceful, energizing, and authentic, you lean into it without fear. This intuitive navigation becomes second nature, and it protects you from repeating old patterns that once kept you stuck. A life aligned with your truth also attracts opportunities and relationships that reflect that truth. When you are clear about who you are, you naturally draw in people who resonate with your clarity. You no longer bend yourself to fit into places where you were never meant to belong. You stand firmly in your path, trusting that what is meant for you will recognize you. Living in alignment doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It means life becomes yours. And that ownership is what gives you the deepest sense of peace, stability, and purpose you've ever known. You learn how to maintain boundaries and self-worth when you spend enough time alone to understand what truly respects you and what quietly diminishes you. Solitude gives you the emotional distance needed to see where you've allowed people to overstep, where you've sacrificed your peace to keep someone close, and where you've compromised pieces of yourself just to avoid conflict or disappointment. When you're single, you no longer have anyone else's emotions, expectations, or needs clouding your judgment. You begin to recognize your own limits, what feels safe, what feels draining, and what feels like a violation of your inner truth. With that awareness, boundaries stop being a defensive wall and start becoming a form of self-respect. As you grow more comfortable with yourself, you become less willing to allow behavior that disrupts your mental and emotional stability. You start saying no without guilt. You start keeping your energy sacred. You stop explaining your worth to those who refuse to see it. This shift is not born from bitterness but from clarity. You realize that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's essential. And once you experience how calm your life becomes when your boundaries are respected, you refuse to go back to the version of yourself who tolerated disrespect just to maintain connection. Being single also teaches you that your worth is not negotiable. You no longer rely on someone else's attention, affection, or approval to feel validated. You learn to affirm yourself, to comfort yourself, to uplift yourself in moments of doubt. This self-reliance deepens your understanding of your own value. Instead of chasing people who don't choose you fully, you choose yourself with a level of devotion you used to reserve for others. And when you choose yourself consistently, your standards rise effortlessly. You stop accepting inconsistency, indifference, or emotional breadcrumbing because they don't align with the way you now treat yourself. Over time, boundaries become an instinct. You don't argue, beg, or over-explain. You simply distance yourself from anything that threatens your sense of self. and as your self-worth grows, your relationships shift too. You start attracting people who respect your limits, honor your emotional space, and meet you with authenticity rather than demand. You no longer fear losing anyone because you trust that anything you lose by honoring your boundaries was never meant for you. This is the quiet power that comes from being single long enough to understand your value. You become unshakable in your self-respect. You prepare yourself for a healthier, more meaningful love when you use your time alone to heal the patterns that once controlled you, instead of rushing into another relationship to distract yourself from them. Solitude forces you to face the parts of you that relationships often hide, the wounds you carry, the insecurities you avoid, the habits you repeat without noticing. When you're single, you can no longer blame anyone else for your emotional cycles. You have to see yourself clearly, and in that clarity, you begin to break your old patterns. You learn to understand your triggers instead of projecting them, and you learn to communicate honestly with yourself before doing so with someone else. This self-awareness becomes the foundation of a healthier future love. As you grow, you learn what a relationship should actually feel like. Not anxious, not uncertain, not draining. You discover the difference between love and attachment, between connection and dependency. You start to realize that real love doesn't confuse you, it steadies you. It doesn't take you away from yourself, it helps you become more of who you already are. The more time you spend alone, the more you recognize what aligns with your emotional well-being and what disrupts it. You begin to see that love is not something you chase, it's something you choose with intention. Being single also strengthens your ability to give and receive love without losing your boundaries or identity. When you've learned to soothe your own emotions, uplift your own spirit, and regulate your own fears, you no longer enter relationships hoping someone else will fix you or complete you. Instead, you enter a relationship from a place of wholeness. This shifts the dynamic entirely. You're no longer afraid of being alone, so you don't tolerate unhealthy behavior. You're no longer starved for affection, so you don't cling to the wrong people. You can walk away from what isn't good for you because you trust that your happiness doesn't depend on another person. Over time, this independence shapes the kind of love you're ready to receive. You become someone who can offer stability instead of chaos, presence instead of distraction, depth instead of performance. And you attract people who meet you at that level. Your solitude becomes the quiet training ground where your heart learns how to love without losing itself, how to give without depletion, and how to receive without fear. By the time the right love arrives, you're not searching for someone to save you. You're ready for someone who can grow with you. In the end, staying single isn't about rejecting love. It's about refusing to abandon yourself ever again. It's the chapter where you rise from old patterns, reclaim your voice, and rebuild your life from a place of inner truth. When you choose solitude with intention, you transform into someone who no longer chases, begs, or settles. You become someone who attracts, who resonates, who chooses from wholeness rather than wounds. And when love finally does cross your path, not the love built on fear, not the love born from emptiness, but the love that recognizes your growth, it won't require you to shrink or sacrifice your peace. It will meet you where you've arrived, grounded, clear, strong, and fully connected to yourself. This is the quiet power of staying single by choice. It prepares you for a life you don't have to explain, a future you don't have to force, and a love that doesn't ask you to lose yourself to keep it. Because the moment you become whole on your own, you stop searching for someone to complete you, and you start attracting someone who can stand beside you.